Good morning. Whenever we gather in this sacred space, it is made more sacred by the presence and attention of each and every one of us. Whether we are here in the sanctuary or attending by live stream from places far and near or viewing sometime in the future, we are here together. I invite us now to turn to the camera and wave to our live streaming friends. Let us take a moment to greet one another.
Good morning. I'm Marcy Thompson, your worship associate this morning. We have chosen to bring ourselves here to this sanctuary together as a community of faith. We join together in solidarity as a covenanted people who are drawn together by the promise of connection and the mysterious pull of the unanswerable. We draw on experiences of love and wonder to lift our hearts and move us beyond the mundane. As seekers, wanderers, appreciators of nature, connoisseurs of curiosity, and creators of connection. Our paths have converged today so that we might become present to the spirit that is worship. And so, let us worship together. I have a few brief announcements. First, although there is no RE this morning, there is preschool and child care for youth up to age 5. Second, there will be a membership class happening after service today in the Mickelson room with the theme focused on what it means to be a member. And third, we invite all who are interested in joining the Winchester Unitarian Society to the new member ceremony on Sunday, May 3rd. Thank you.
We join with the earth and with each other to bring new life to the land, to restore the waters, to refresh the air. We join with the earth and with each other. To renew the forests, to care for the plants, to protect the creatures, we join with the earth and with each other. To celebrate the seas, to rejoice in the sunlight, to sing the song of the stars. We join with the earth and with each other. To create the human community, to promote justice and peace, to remember our children, we join with the earth and with each other. We join together at many and diverse expressions of one loving mystery, for the healing of the earth and the renewal of all life. May these words from the United Nations Environmental Sabbath Program lead us now into this sacred time and space. Come, let us worship together.
I'd like to invite Ira Spencer up to light our chalice today. Thank you. The words for our chalice lighting today are from Sherry Woodbury, titled Alive in All Creation. Spark of the Spirit, cupped in earth's embrace, light of love, alive in all creation. As we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life. Please rise in body or in spirit to join in singing hymn number 7, the leaf unfurling in your gray hymnal.
Right. So since we're not sending the kids out to Ari this morning, and since the story really is for everyone, I'm just going to tell it to all of you. So our story has been adapted from my colleague, Reverend Suzanne Intriligator, from Doug Tallamy's book, Nature's Best Hope. And so while some details have been adjusted for flow, this is a true story about real people. So our main character is a guy named Ted. And Ted lived in a lovely suburban town in a lovely suburban house, and he liked to keep everything tidy and beautiful. To Ted, the ideal landscape was pruned and mowed, with colors blooming throughout the seasons, always manicured and perfect. Ted considered his large, immaculate lawn a sign of respectable neighborhood stewardship. He was doing his part to maintain property values and to spare his neighbors blowing leaves and dandelion spores. Does anybody here know anybody like this in their neighborhood? Yeah. So on the weekend, when he wasn't gardening, Ted loved to go walking and go hiking. He considered himself a real nature lover, and being among the trees gave him deep peace of mind. In spring of 2020, however, when Ted was out walking in a local preservation area, he stopped to admire a little stream. It made such a lovely little babbling sound floating along, so he bent down to look closer. The water was clear and beautiful, and he was admiring it, and then he noticed something felt off. And he realized that when he was a kid and he would walk by this stream, it was full of stuff. Tadpoles, dragonflies, minnows, toads, turtles, all of this stuff. And he realized when he was walking then as an adult that it was beautiful and empty, too clear. Ted continued his hike and his walk and went home, and then later that afternoon, his phone rang, and it was his daughter, Penny. Penny had a different approach to gardening. In fact, she used to lecture him about things like watershed and pollinators and carbon sequestration, but Ted wasn't convinced. So after a while, they just agreed to disagree. Tonight, Penny asked if Ted could come babysit his grandkids, little Amanda and Teddy. And he was always happy to, loves his grandkids, right on board. But he realized he'd been doing a lot more of the babysitting recently. And so when he got to Penny's that night, he asked, "Hey, what's going on? I've noticed I've been coming over a lot for the kids. What have you been doing?" And Penny said, "Well, I've been volunteering for a group called Monarch Watch. It's a national organization that promotes creation and restoration of monarch habitats. We also provide the host and nectar plants needed to rebuild the butterfly populations, all over town in parks and open spaces and yards when we're invited. We've been planting sunflowers and milkweed and blue asters." But why? Said Ted. What does that do? And he said, because monarch caterpillars feed exclusively on milkweeds, and the adult butterflies really like blue asters. But nobody plants them anymore. Because of that, the monarchs are going. In the last 10 years, monarch populations have declined 96% here in California. Ted thought about the monarchs. He thought about that stream that he'd seen nearby with no insects in it at all, and he began to wonder. And so he asked Penny if she might plant a few milkweeds along his back fence. Of course, she said, and she planted a whole row along his backyard. Just a few days later, Ted called to say he'd seen an egg. Then the next day he phoned to say he'd seen a monarch butterfly, and another and another. I don't think I have enough food for all the caterpillars, Ted told Penny. I need more milkweeds and some blue asters for the adults. Ted, as it turned out, was hooked. The monarchs had awakened his paternal instincts, and he nurtured them as his own. They gave him great joy all summer long. A year later, Ted was thrilled to hear, via Monarch Watch, that monarch populations were bouncing back. In 2020, volunteers counted just 2,000 butterflies, monarch butterflies, in all of California. But in 2021, they counted 250,000, a 100-fold increase in just 1 year. Then Ted realized if he could use his property to help save the monarchs, maybe he could help other species too. He read and learned that because his lawn and all his lovely ornamental plants were not native to his area, they offered nothing, no nourishment at all to the insects that had evolved to live there too. Ted realized if he planted more native species like milkweeds, native insects would come back, as would the birds that feed on them. With careful planting, Ted could help save other endangered species like the zebra swallowtail or the northern cardinal or the Carolina chickadee. Ted realized there was a whole world to discover, or rather, reintroduce to his yard. And so he did. He took up half his lawn and planted all sorts of native ground cover, shrubbery, and wildflowers. And back came the insects, and back came the birds. And with all that nature came a boundless joy, which Ted shared daily with neighbors and friends, children and grandchildren. So if you hadn't figured it out already, our service today, leading into Earth Day, is about the environment. And it's just a reminder to us, right, that, with all of these huge problems that we're facing with the environment and the climate and all this stuff that's going on, that there are things that we can do. I mean, you can get involved in larger organizations and governmental change and all that, but there's also things we can do right in our own backyard. All right. Here ends our first reflection. All right, now for our time of prayer and meditation. I invite you to get settled into your space. Maybe you close your eyes. Maybe you ground yourself by placing both feet on the floor. Maybe you take a deep breath in and out. Let us reflect together now on this meditation by poet Nancy Wood. My help is in the mountain, where I take myself to heal the earthly wounds that people give to me. I find a rock with sun on it, and a stream where the water runs gentle, and the trees which one by one give me company. So must I stay for a long time, until I have grown from the rock, and the stream is running through me, and I cannot tell myself from one tall tree. Then I know that nothing touches me, nor makes me run away. My help is in the mountain that I take away with me. Earth, cure me. Earth, receive my woe. Rock, strengthen me. Rock, receive my weakness. Rain, wash my sadness away. Rain, receive my doubt. Sun, make sweet my song. Sun, receive the anger from my heart. You may come forward and light a candle now if you wish. Let us kindle the light. Our first reading this morning is an excerpt from their essay, Becoming Resilient Community Life for a New Age, by Peggy Clark and Matthew McHale. They wrote, "As our world moves into an uncertain future, best beset by social, ecological, and economic crises, the fact that we seem unable to pull ourselves off the path of destruction has many of us terrified and confounded. Even those who can clearly see the cliff we are barreling toward have a hard time envisioning, much less articulating, an alternative to the dominant political economic system that has its foot on the accelerator. As Frederick Jameson quips in the New Left Review, it's easier for us to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism." Thus, one of the most vital tasks in these times is to imagine alternatives to continuing business as usual. Alternatives that offer us a way off the path of ecological destruction and also reject the unjust and oppressive realities of the dominant system in favor of a resilient and life-sustaining society. As a religious people, we can think of this as living into the prophetic tradition. In The Prophetic Imagination, theologian Walter Brueggemann writes that while we often think of prophetic ministry as simply decrying the injustices of society, it's more broadly about nurturing, nourishing, and evoking a, quote, consciousness and perception alternative to consciousness and perception of the dominant culture around us. Every prophetic act, then, is a way of evoking, forming, and reforming an alternative community. With their unique position in our society, religious communities can play a vital role in experimenting with and modeling alternative ways of living. At this critical juncture, our world needs our congregations to be models of the life-sustaining society we want to create. Here ends our first reading.
Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. Remember you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember.
Friends, there is no sugarcoating it. When it comes to the environment, we are indeed facing potential ecological disaster. Some might say we're already living it. A tipping point is approaching where things might get really bad really quickly, and we seem to lack the political will to make significant changes. Our individual efforts can feel pointless. We don't want to say it's impossible because that would be giving up, but sometimes we feel that way, that we're careening towards a cliff in a runaway train with no one to put on the brakes before it's too late. Nelson Mandela reminds us, though, that, quote, "it always seems impossible until it's done." Slavery was never going to not exist in the United States. It was too central to our economy, too central to this and that, until it didn't. Women were not going to get the right to vote for many, many years, through some activists' lifetimes, until they did. And apartheid in South Africa was never going to end until it too came to an end. And so with the environment, I wonder, is Mandela right? Is there a path back from the brink of vicious weather cycles and rising sea levels and all of the things we human beings are inflicting on the planet? And if so, what is that path? What does it look like? With the environment, how do we get from possible to done? There are many different answers to that question. The one I'm going to offer up for our consideration this morning is this: we need to change the story. The need to change the story is lifted up by many environmental activists and theologians. We've already heard from Peggy Clark and Matthew McHale call us to imagine alternatives to continuing business as usual. We already heard the call from Walter Brueggemann to consider prophetic ministry as more than simply decrying the injustices of society, and consider it instead to be about nourishing, nurturing, and evoking an alternative consciousness and perception other than the dominant culture around us. In their book, Active Hope: How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone make this call even more explicit. They name the two predominant stories of our time and suggest we consider instead adopting a third. The first two predominant stories they lift up are called Business as Usual and The Great Unraveling. The central point of the business as usual story we tell ourselves is that life is all about getting ahead, and getting ahead means growing the economy, treating nature as a commodity, and consuming more. It's a story we tell in our country pretty often. The main point of the Great Unraveling story is that things are getting worse. We're running out of resources, the climate is going to hell, and that we're socially and culturally divided, and nothing we can do will make a difference. In other words, things are bad and they're getting worse. And they suggest that these two stories exist side by side in our culture, an embrace of capitalism as culture and a sense of impending doom. When it comes to the environment, and this probably applies to other areas too, but for environment specifically for these folks, Macy and Johnstone suggest that we need a new story, a third story to claim as our own. They call this third story the Great Turning. They write, "In the agricultural revolution of 10,000 years ago, the domestication of plants and animals led to a radical shift in the way people lived. In the Industrial Revolution that began just a few hundred years ago, a similar dramatic transition took place. These weren't just changes in the small details of people's lives. The whole basis of society was transformed, including people's relationship with one another and with Earth. Right now, a shift of comparable scope and magnitude is occurring. This is our third story. We call it The Great Turning and see it as the essential adventure of our time. It involves the transition from a doomed economy of industrial growth to a life-sustaining society committed to the recovery of our world. This transformation is already well underway." They continue, In the early stages of major transitions, the initial activity might seem to exist only at the fringes. Yet when their time comes, ideas and behaviors become contagious. The more people pass on inspiring perspectives, the more these perspectives catch on. At a certain point, the balance tips and we reach critical mass. Viewpoints and practices that were once on the margins become the new mainstream. In the story of the Great Turning, what's catching on is commitment to act for the sake of life on earth, as well as the vision, courage, and solidarity to do so. I have to say, I admire their optimism. And it feels a little hard to believe as they say that the transition is already well underway, at least for me. I have to admit that I am still skeptical. But I sure hope they're right. And more importantly, I can still act as if they are, even as I'm skeptical. Because we do need to change what's happening in the world. And part of how we can do that is by changing the dominant stories that we and so many others tell ourselves. If we tell ourselves that it is impossible, it will be. We have to keep working at the change even when it seems impossible, until it isn't impossible anymore. Macy and Johnstone lift up 3 key dimensions of work that needs to be part of the Great Turning. 2 of them, taking preventative measure to prevent further damage, and imagining and creating new ways of being, are both vitally important. They can also feel overwhelming. If you feel called to take them on, fantastic, thank you, and love bless you as you take on that work. This morning, though, I want to lift up the 3rd dimension in particular, as it feels more accessible, something each and every one of us can do easily in our day-to-day lives, even as the task remains huge. The 3rd dimension is that shift of consciousness, which they summarize as changing our perception, thinking, and values. Does that sound familiar from some of our previous writers and theologians? It's changing the story, but not only changing our own story, but changing the story of our whole culture. And that is something that happens conversation by conversation, protest by protest, town hall meeting by town hall meeting. That is change we can help make happen. Environmental writer Naomi Klein states, "Fundamentally, the task is to articulate not just an alternative set of policy proposals, but an alternative worldview to rival the one at the heart of the ecological crisis. Embedded in interdependence rather than hyper-individualism, reciprocity rather than dominance, and cooperation rather than hierarchy. This is another lesson from the transformative movements of the past. All of them understood that the process of shifting cultural values was central to their work. And so they dreamed in public, showed humanity a better version of itself, modeled different values in their own behavior, and in the process liberated the political imagination and rapidly altered the sense of what was possible. They were also unafraid of the language of morality," she concludes, "to give the pragmatic cost-benefit arguments a rest and speak of right and wrong, of love and indignation." And so, friends, we should and we need to dream in public. We should show humanity a better version of itself. We should model different values in our own behavior. And I would add, in addition to being unafraid of the language of morality, we should also be unafraid of the language of spirituality and religion. We need to offer hope to ourselves, to each other, and to others. Hope can come from practical solutions and strategies. And often hope comes from dreaming big and speaking the words of spirituality and love. Buckminster Fuller said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." To inspire ourselves and the rest of the world, we need more than just plans and solutions. We need dreams and inspiration and hope. We need the language of love and poetry and spirituality. We need, yes, we can, for the environment. The bottom line is, what you say, the conversations you have, they matter. It can be hard to impossible to tell in each moment, but the more we collectively have these conversations, the more we collectively shift and change our story, the more likely real change is to happen. Policy change and structural change usually first require cultural change. And so we have to change the cultural conversation. Recent movements that have made a difference, Black Lives Matter and #MeToo, for example, they didn't take off in a vacuum. Those incidents of racism and sexism that sparked the movements weren't new. They had been happening all along. And it wasn't like all of a sudden we just had a different reaction for some strange reason. People had been having those conversations, activists had been having these conversations about race and sexism for years and decades. And finally, when the same thing happened again, just like it had been happening, something clicked in our cultural consciousness. After all those decades of individual and community conversations, something clicked and those movements were born. And while, of course, they haven't solved racism and sexism, real change has happened. It can be hard to remember with all the terrible things happening in the world, but things have happened. Confederate statues came down. The Washington football team finally changed its name after decades of insisting they'd never stop using a racial slur as their team name. There is so much more work to be done, of course. And the results of all those conversations that were happening before these movements were sparked, they're tangible. They happened. The cultural conversation has shifted some for racism and for sexism, and it can for the environment as well. One thing you can start doing immediately to work on climate change is to start talking more about it and what we need to do to make a difference. If getting organized and going to meetings and attending protests is your thing, that is a fantastic option. And I chose our first reflection this morning as a reminder that if transforming our capitalistic structures of existence feels too overwhelming, there are smaller things that we can do as individuals that can really make a difference. In California, in just 1 year, through the acts of individuals planting the right species, they went from 2,000 monarch butterflies to 250,000 in just a year, just by planting different plants in their yards as a group. Imagine the impact our church could have if we organized something similarly appropriate to our local wildlife. Imagine the impact Winchester could have if we acted together. There is so much we can do, things that will have an impact right away, even as we continue to work to change the big national conversation, even as we work to change laws and structures. So friends, with Earth Day approaching, and really Earth Day should be every day, right? But with actual official Earth Day approaching, let us begin to tell a new story. Let us begin to tell the story of the Great Turning. Let us tell the story of the Great Turning to ourselves, to our fellow church members, to our friends and neighbors, and to the Winchester community at large. Let us tell the story of the Great Turning to our state legislators and our national government. It always seems impossible until it's done. Let us tell the story. Let us change the story. Let us make the seemingly impossible possible. Yes, things are looking grim. Can we turn things around? Yes, we can, together.
One hoped-for goal of our church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is one of the great ends of all world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We are now asked to make an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will help support this self-supporting church and its many ministries, which we all benefit from. This week's Share the Plate recipient is the Gardens for Good, a community group which has committed to turning parts of our lawns into gardens and or volunteering our time to grow fresh produce for neighbors who are patrons of the Council for Social Concern and the Enka Food Pantry. Ways to give are printed in your order of service. The offering will now be generously given and gratefully received.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake
Those who wish to do so are invited to join in the unison affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Please rise in body or in spirit to join in singing our closing hymn in your teal hymnal number 1064, Blue Boat Home.
Friends, the stories we tell, the visions we cast, the dreams we offer to the world, they matter. They matter for the environment, and with all that's going on in the world, they matter that we cast our vision of peace. It matters that we cast our vision of economic equality. This is part of what we are called to do as a community, and so let us do that together and offer the hope and dreams we have for love and goodness in the world to each other and to the broader world. Go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the words printed in your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, that not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the power of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our service has ended, but our life of service continues. Please join us in the Sims room for refreshments.